as we projected on Saturday night, which was like 3 episodes ago, the top 8 remains unchanged. Louisville moves up into the top 10, result of the losses for Ole Miss and Penn State. Penn State falls 3 spots to 12, Ole Miss 3 spots to 13. Missouri, after its impressive win against Tennessee, up 5 spots to number 11. Utah didn't fall that far back after a close loss at Washington, down to number 16. Tennessee down to number 21, and even that might be too high. And Oklahoma State, after the loss to UCF, down 9 spots to number 24. Kansas falls out of the top 25. Any thoughts on the AP poll? I've got so this is less AP poll related, but what?
Ole Miss way too high. Their wins are awful. I mean,
counter. They are on the lower. If you were doing the ordinal ranking thing, they are on the lower end of the 2 lost teams.
Not low enough for me.
Yes. So
did you see Stats War put out the success rate graphic today?
Did we get beat? No.
They were close. Just a couple key plays away.
They were, I think the top one, I can't remember what the biggest gap was, but Georgia over Ole Miss was number 2. So like that game, you could argue that it wasn't even as close as the score suggests it was.
Which sets the stage for other rankings news here on this Monday morning, because 5 weeks ago, the Michigan Wolverines beat out Georgia for the number 1 spot in the CBS Sports 133 by a single voting point. We rank every single team in the FBS. It's compiled by ballots from members of CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports. And for the last 5 weeks, to varying degrees, Michigan has had a gap in this against Georgia in the CBS 133 that it has not had in the AP Top 25 or the coaches poll. Georgia took its corners back. Georgia beat that ass against the Rebels, and now Georgia has reclaimed the number 1 spot in the CBS Sports 133. I lay that to say, and this is funny because it's after Michigan's best win of the season. Resume-wise, you go into Happy Valley, you beat Penn State on the road. There's not a win on the profile on paper that's going to look better, but what Georgia was able to do and what it has done in the last 2 weeks, what Missouri went on to do in the next week against Tennessee, is all strengthening the Bulldogs' profile. So do you think Georgia can take number 1 from Ohio State on Tuesday night?
Yeah.
And they should.
Yeah.
Georgia for the last 3 weeks has probably looked like the best team. And Michigan finally played a game in which the opponent had somewhat similar athletes, and the passing game was not relied upon, but it was also not featured, right? And I do think that one of the reasons, if you think Michigan has taken a step forward this year, is that you think McCarthy's taken a step forward, and Michigan just really didn't show much in the pass game. So I have a little bit of uncertainty about their pass game, not as much as I did last year, but Georgia looks more complete. Carson Beck looks really, really good. Even the interception wasn't his fault. Getting Amarius Mims back helps a lot. Like adding first-round talents back to your roster, turns out can be helpful in mid-November, and Georgia added 2 back. So I think Georgia should be number 1.
I agree. Georgia should be number 1. But as for the results of the poll this week, I think it's reflective of what we see every year, and it is something we've talked about a lot. Georgia whoops a top 10 team that really we have discussed on this show all season long, so this is not hindsight. Was not a very good top 10 team. Wasn't nearly as good as its record suggests, and gets all the credit in the world for it. Michigan goes on the road and beats a top 10 team. And yeah, they only won by 9, but at no point in that game were they ever in danger of losing. They didn't throw, not because they couldn't, but because they had no need to. And it's suddenly, well, it's not that impressive of a win because Penn State kind of stinks, so we're not really going to give them any credit for it. If you're a fraudulent top 10 SEC team, you get credit for beating them. If you're a top 10 Big Ten team, they were never that good to begin with because they didn't score a lot of points. So it's an interesting way to see how that reacts. And I think the greatest person that is a reflection of this, going back to assassinating our pollsters, Scott Springer, a writer for the Cincinnati Enquirer. Do you know where he has Penn State on his ballot this week?
7.
No.
Oh, unranked.
20.
Yeah. He doesn't have them ranked. So because Penn State has lost 2 games to Ohio State and Michigan, he decided they don't deserve to be in the top 25. But yet at number 13, he has a Notre Dame team that lost to Ohio State, Louisville, and Clemson. Because I don't know, but it's just this is what happens. Penn State plays poorly against teams that it's not as good as, and it sucks now. It beats the crap out of everybody else it plays, but since it can't beat 2 of the top 4 teams in the country, it's garbage and it doesn't deserve to be ranked. So it's not as extreme, but that is very much a symptom you see from voters every single year.
Agree with Tom's point. If I'm gonna support this guy, what's his name? Scott
Springer.
All right, Scott. Maybe Scott is somebody who favors wins, like just evaluates the quality of your wins. And from that standpoint, and the committee does this a little bit, they don't perfectly mirror that. And they do sort of just ordinal rank teams based on losses. And like within the group of 0 and 1 and 2 losses, they rank you based on merit, allegedly. Does Notre Dame have better wins than Penn State? I think so.
Duke, but yeah.
And beating the crap out of USC.
All right. Well, does Iowa have better wins than Penn State? Or did Iowa lose to Penn State? Because he's got Iowa ranked at 21.
Iowa lost to Penn State 31-0.
Oh, they did.
Yeah,
that's right. Oh, crap. Well, that throws that out of the water.
No Big Ten West team should be in the top 40. No,
hey, whoa.
35. Okay, fine.
Okay,
35.
right.
Agreed.
500 yards, 4 touchdowns, 48 points. That's all I'm going to say.
Fair
but yeah, no, it is reactionary to the extreme.
It was a mistake, apparently. He tweeted that it was a mistake and they are number 18 on his re-uploaded ballot.
Okay, well, Scott, I take it all back.
Scott, 18 is low end for me, but reasonable.
But I'll accept it. It's still the lowest of anybody that voted this week, because I think the lowest other than Scott was 17. But yeah, it's more acceptable than I'm just not going to rank him at all. While I have Notre Dame at 13.
You know what the floor is? They can't be behind Tulane. All right.
Yeah.
No, they ain't been nothing in the last month of Tulane Green Wave football that says, yeah, us ahead of Penn State for sure. So that's because sometimes we approach rankings thinking about the numbers. Oh, that's not a top 10 team. That's not a top 20 team. The definition of what is or is not a top 10 or top 20 team changes every year. And sometimes week to week. So stacking them up against the other teams that are occupying that different space, I would say that anything behind that Tulane kind of like 17, 18, 19 mark is a bit of an overreaction, even if Penn State's effort for the upset lacked teeth. All right. Anything else from the rankings or expectations for the playoff rankings?
I think you could see Georgia move into number 1 in the playoff rankings. I also think you could see Washington pass Florida State.
Are we surprised? I don't think you will, but again, it's for a TV show, and those two will sort each other out. Do you go undefeated or not?
Yeah.
Right.
But if we're gonna say look at the last 2 weeks, and Washington is able to trot out win against a ranked opponent, and Florida State's there with Pitt and Miami, then the committee could definitely say that the profile has changed enough just to swap them 4 or 5.
Jordan's probably going to mute me for this. So I'm going to say it really fast. Why is Tennessee ranked? What good wins does Tennessee have this year? They've been blown out 3 times. I mean, like Bama blew them out, Missouri blew them out, Florida blew them out. Their wins are
Tennessee is who everybody seems to think Penn State is.
Yes, exactly. Right. Like their wins aren't dominant in any way, really. I mean, like South Carolina, A&M.
It's Kentucky and A&M and I looked at it because Tennessee in the CBS Sports 133 had one of the biggest moves down of anybody week to week.
So your like positive games are 2 coin flips that landed for you against Kentucky and Texas A&M.
Correct.
SEC though.
SEC got a committee will still love it because you got to justify all these SEC teams. Yeah.